Good evening and welcome to the Digital Policy Engagement Series. Deboye here will introduce the organization, then I'd come and introduce my organization, and then we keep the conversation moving from there.
All right, thank you. And before I do that, I think it would be great for us to know ourselves first, right? So let me start from my left.
Hi, my name is Tolulope Abiodun, head of sales, Maple. One interesting thing about me, I can really dance.
My name is Susan Akiade. I'm an associate at Jacksonetti and Edo in the intellectual property department. Uh, Fun thing about me, let's say music. Yes, I think.
My name is Abra Dangna and I'm affiliated to Advocacy for Policy and Innovation API. One interesting thing about me, I love to bake.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ola Dotson Oyemi. I'm a policy analyst at Tech Advisory. And interesting thing about me is that anything that involves adventure, as long as we're going to scream, who will count me in. All right. So
Good evening, everyone. My name is Blessing Udo. I work with Jackson at Etia Nedru. One interesting thing about me is that I love sports. Whether I'm good at it or not, but I just love sports.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ridwan Badmos. I am a tech lawyer and the CTO of Ogotoy and Ogotoy. And I'm also a privacy technologist and senior consultant at FR Data Protection, a privacy consultant firm. It's hard to find an interesting thing about me, but I'd say I combine law and tech. So I'm not sure if that's an interesting thing.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenneth Uyini Kenneth, and I work with Paradigm Initiative on the communications team. One interesting thing about me is that I would love to have a dance off with. I'm joking. I don't know how to dance. But one interesting thing about me is I love music.
Hi everyone, my name is Adewolu. I lead government affairs and public policy at Google. Fun fact: I was in the choir at law school actually, but no, I'm not singing tonight. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela Onyebuna. I work with Paradigm Initiative as the IT officer. One interesting thing about me, when I'm not working, when I'm not doing anything IT related, I just love to sew, make my own dress.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I am Bolaji Algalu. I'm a head public policy at Uber. One fun thing about me, I once took a road trip from Lagos to Kebbi State sometime in 2019. Yeah, and it was a very life-changing experience.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kofo Sonia, Executive Assistant, Tech Hive Advisory. Fun thing about me, I can swim really well. Yeah. So, and I love pink, I guess.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Victoria. I work with Tech Hive as a tech policy analyst. One interesting thing about me, you can, as long as you give me jollof rice, like that's, it's also the problem. I mean, if you hear that maybe someone kidnapped me tomorrow or something, just know that it had something to do with jollof rice. Cause okay, Nigerian jollof. What's Ghanaian jollof? So if you just need me to do anything, just look at me and say, "How far? There's jollof." Oh, you know it. Yeah, right there.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Solomon. Over there, I'm a tech policy analyst at Tech Hub Advisory. Um, Wanna be tech bro. I'm trying. I'll get there someday. But anyway, one fun thing about me, I enjoy art. Right? So whenever I see exhibitions, I will be there no matter what. So I'm always there. And I hike too. I enjoy hiking. But Lagos has killed that in me. I hope to be in Abuja soon. Grab some of the rocks. Oh yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua. Joshua, okay. I work with Paradigm Initiative as the junior developer, technically the only dev guy on the team. Fun thing about me, I'm I like to play a lot, and I like to be a nice guy to Kenneth in the office. Thank you.
My name is Kende. My name is Kende. Kende Adebega. My affiliation. Okay, I work with Human Rights Journalist Network, Nigeria. Fun thing. Fun thing. Huh? I like dancing once in a while. No, I don't have money to pay people. I like dancing once in a while.
It's a pleasure to have everybody. My name is Adeboye Adegoke, one of the hosts for this event, and my duty is to give an opening remarks, also kind of set the tone for the chat this evening. Paradigm Initiative is a non-profit organization working to promote digital inclusion and digital rights in Africa. We have offices in 6 countries in Africa, and team members in all the offices as well. This event, AfroCities Cafe, is part of our digital policy engagement series. Our digital policy engagement series is an umbrella name that we like to use to talk about every work we do around policy advocacy, policy influencing. So we have a lot of initiative in this context. Sometimes we do host policy dialogue sessions with parliamentarians, with other civic actors, with other stakeholders such as the academics as well, and people in the tech ecosystem. But we also started the AfroCities Cafe. We started that this year, and it's a platform for conversation, light-hearted conversation, a departure from what we typically would do, meeting with parliamentarians, everybody wearing strong faces and everybody wearing suit and tie, looking all serious. Although I see there are still people and I know they are lawyers. They know the hair word. They must still cack up. So, but the idea is to have light-hearted conversation in a less formal environment about tech issues that affect us and how they affect us. And also, in terms of the objective, it's also to be able to create voices of concerns or of issues from a user experience as opposed to what would typically be conversation from experts perspective. So what we try to do during AfroCities Cafe is to give participants an opportunity to engage, have conversation on policy issues based on their personal experiences, not just based on their expertise alone, also based on their reality. So, for example, today we are talking about platform governance. Previously, we had the last session in Nairobi, and we spoke about the readiness of the Data Protection Act in Kenya for AI, for artificial intelligence revolution. And we had the Deputy Data Protection Commissioner who joined us for a fireside chat before we went to that conversation. That conversation basically focused on, looking at the AI. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, and it's taking over a lot of things right now, whether in HR, whether in health system, even in the justice system as well. And so we are looking at the readiness of the existing framework for that. But in this conversation, we're looking at platform governance. And talking about platform governance, we're looking at it from different perspectives. So there's platform governance from perspective of normative frameworks that are being discussed or that have been created to look into the subject of platform governance. But we're also looking at what is happening locally in Nigeria. There have been some efforts to, there is this NIDA code of practice, for example. I'm sure Oga Adewolu will speak more about it during the fireside chat with him. There is also, of course, existing laws such as the Cyber Crimes Act, which one way or the other also, touches on platform. But beyond that, there is also some conversation we are having around online harms protection. But beyond all of that too, one of the things we also like to hear is what the platforms themselves are doing, because most of the platforms are also proactive in terms of setting rules and standards, in terms of governance of platforms. I wish we had somebody from Meta here. They have done some things like creating the oversight board, for example, as part of their governance mechanism. So we also want to listen to the platforms that are here. We have Uber in the room as well, the head of public policy for West Africa, who will also be able to tell us. By the way, I have an axe to grind with Uber. I came late for this meeting because of Uber. Anyways, basically that's what we are here to do, but I just really hope that you would have fun while at this, and most importantly, that you'll be counted, because we want this to really be like a conversation. So even the chat we are going to have is going to be very brief. It's going to be more about conversation. We want to listen to everybody. We want to hear what you think about the issues. And if you have a question as well, you can ask. But trust me, we are more interested in what you think about the issues than the questions that you have. But it's fine. Feel free to ask questions. And if you have personal questions for Uber and Google, you can also speak to them while we are doing some of the social activities like the game and the food, all of that. So thank you very much. I will pass the mic back to our coordinator for the day, which is Diana. Please a round of applause for her.
My name is Diana Uzo. I am a tech policy analyst at Tech Hive Advisory. I lead the data protection team. I'll tell you about Tech Hive Advisory, and I'll tell you the weird thing about me, or fun thing about me. All right, Tech Hive Advisory is a it's an organization that you typically find at the intersection between technology, law, and business. So the average person in Tech Hive wears the hat of a lawyer, technologist, if there's a word like that, and a businessman. All right, and we would be advising on such issues like data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, fundraising, regulatory intelligence, financial advisory, combating financial terrorism, and the rest, AML. Those are some of the things that we do. All right, that's about Tech Hive. Then, the weird thing about me, is it weird? But one time when somebody asked me my favorite food, I said bread. And I thought about it, and it's still bread. And it may be dull, but I like bread. I think I favor flour, anything baked with flour. I think my taste buds just like it. So I like pastries, I like bread. All right, so that's about me. We've heard the opening remarks from Boye, and I think we can go straight to the fireside chat. All right, we're going to be discussing with two interesting people. Boye already laid the foundation for the conversation, but I'll give more context. We're going to be chatting with Bolaji and Adewolu. Can I have the previous screen first? Okay, so we're going to be chatting with Bolaji and Adewolu, and I would read the profile, and I will invite the speaker. I'll read the second person's profile and invite the speaker to come and sit with me. All right, so let's have the next screen. So who is Bolaji Ogalu? He's a leader in comparative African tech and public policy. All right, so his profile is here. But what he's doing now is that he's leading public policy initiatives for West Africa at Uber. So he day-to-day looks like collaborating with the government, with responsible for the end goal of producing responsible tech regulations. And we're talking about platform governance, all right? And we would also want to know what the Nigerian government is doing, and if we can learn from other West African countries. I think he would have some context. Before now, he was an associate at Olaniwon Ajayi. I was speaking to him yesterday, and he was telling me about some of his contributions to the laws we have. He was also a contributor to the Nigerian Data Protection Act of 2023 when he was at Olaniwon Ajayi. Olaniwon Ajayi is a tier 1 firm, we know that. Beyond his professional engagements, he's the founder and chief analyst at Berg. Berg is a youth-driven think tank committed to building a knowledge-driven African society. His expertise lies at the intersection of governance, society, and technology, and he wants to join his voice to making impactful laws. All right, when he's not working, he likes photography, football, fashion, art, maybe road trips, as we've heard now. All right, so let's welcome Bolaji. Thank you. We have a comfortable couch for you here. All right, please, we can keep clapping till he sits. Thank you. Okay. We have another speaker in the house, Adewolu. Do we know where he is? What's he wearing? What's he wearing? Blue. Okay, yes, he's wearing blue. Yes. So Adewolu is with us here. And when I saw his profile, I just thought it would be easier for him to say he's a lawyer. But Adewolu goes to say he has a law degree, and then he went to Nigerian law school in 2 separate sentences. But that's interesting. But yes, he's a lawyer, he's been called to the Nigerian bar, but he did his master's in international business management. He has work experience across administration, government relation, policy and regulation, stakeholder engagement, business strategy across different organizations like Etisalat, MTN, Computer Professionals Registration Council. Right now, Adewolu leads government affairs and public policy at Google Nigeria. And he's a firm believer in unlocking the transformative potential of technology through supportive policy framework. So our 2 guests have a passion for creating impact through policy. We'll be happy to hear from you today. All right, so let's clap for Adewolu as he makes his way to the seats. Please keep clapping. I'm seeing some people not clapping. All right. All right. Thank you, Adewolu. All right. So we're going to be discussing platform governance with our, I don't want to say panelists, but with our speakers today. But before we start, I want us to play a small game of 2 truths, 1 lie. So you tell us 2 truths, 1 lie, both of you. And then anyone in the audience can tell us which one is the lie. Do you need a moment? You need a moment. Okay. No, think of something that can be believable. Like me, I can't say I am Diana, my surname is Uzo, and I'm a boy. It's obvious the lie there. So think of something challenging. Bolaji, you look like you're good to go. You're not? All right. I'll let you dwell on that for a moment. You're ready? 2 truths, a lie. And mind you, with these games that we're playing, there is a gift for the winner.
I can't swim. I play golf. I've never been to the Redeemed Christian Camp.
He can't swim, he plays golf, and he has never been to Redeem Camp.
I think the lie is that he has never been to Redeem Christian Camp. That's what I think.
Okay.
The lie is that he plays golf.
You second that. All right. Adewolu, do you want to tell us?
So I like to tell stories. So let me just. So first off is, yes, I play golf. It's been a while. When I was at school for my masters, there was a weekend trip thing, and we'd go to the golf course and they'd teach us through. But it's been a while. But I guess if I got back into it, I'd pick it up. Swimming, same thing. When you were kids, to take you to the pool. You know, I haven't been in a while, so if you put me in front of water now, I might flinch. But I guess I will get into the rhythm if you give me a bit of time. Camp is the one I've never been, as in never.
1, I'm the last child. 2, I was the captain of my school football team. And the last one, I have been to 7 African countries.
All right, I disagree with the last one. You've been to more than 7 African countries.
Okay, they think you're a traveler here. All right.
Interesting. The lie is the last one is a lie, because And the reason why I picked that was because of my role. I want to think it's true because I call West Africa, so I picked that. So people.
So have you been to
set
more or
confidence.
less?
No less.
Less.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
I'm the last child.
No, he's giving last child. Again, I say it. Okay, so we're talking about platform governance in Nigeria. And I'll throw this question first to Adewolu, and then I'll give you your question. What is platform governance really? What are, I know Boye gave us some angles to it. There's the role that the platform plays, there's the role the government plays, right? But what is it? What do you think it is?
Thank you, Diana. I think, simply put, it's a coming together of those two elements that Boye described. Um, so, on the one hand, you have the platforms where a lot of these communication and exchanges take place, right? The YouTubes, the Facebooks, the WhatsApps, and all of those kinds of things. And they have internal governance around what you can and cannot do in terms of expressing yourself on those platforms. They have internal governance around what happens when you violate, you know, those kind of conditions. Well, I try not to call them rules, but I think particularly I find interesting for WhatsApp, they call them community guidelines. I like the sound of it's a community. So yeah, that's on the one hand, internally, that's a bit of self-regulation. Externally is because, of course, platforms are a place of communication. Citizens also use platforms to buy and sell, so there's interaction on platforms. In some cases, there's exchange of money, there's exchange of information. So, of course, government has a duty from that perspective to keep an eye on what's going on there and want to define what should and what shouldn't be happening on platforms. So, for me, it's the coming together of those two elements: the internally defined and driven self-regulation and moderation of what can and cannot happen across your platforms, and then secondly is the external bit, which is government in view of its duties and responsibilities towards citizens and users of those platforms, also saying this is what is important in terms of how you deal with the information of my citizens. This is what is important in terms of communication that perhaps threatens national interest and security. This is how you deal in instances where I require information of things that have happened or transpired across your platform. So, long story short, for me, it's a coming together of the internal approaches to self-moderation and governance, and then, of course, government's role as a social barometer, if you will. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Adeolu. And from what I get from what you've said, there's the internal bit, there's the external bit. So I'm going to, bounce off that question to Bolaji. There's definitely something the government does with platform governance. They have a role to play. In Nigeria in particular right now, what is our government saying? What do we have? Do we have laws? Are we up to speed? Are these laws effective, in your own opinion?
It's interesting. I think in terms of development, from where we came from, where we saw things more traditional before tech became the norm, right? There are already like existing discussions around, for instance, privacy, for instance, how data is being handled, even if today we try to use data more in a very loose term, right? Or data, it just seems like more techy, right? But before, at the foundational level, when the Constitution was even created, when the right to privacy in the Constitution was created, there were still a governance around how you handle data. It wasn't elaborate, but it was there, right? Sometimes we say it was there in passing, right? It wasn't direct. And when you look at that, you want to build from there, right? And we see that happen a lot of times in Nigeria, even across the world, where tech will always be complementary, right? Tech just amplifies what is already existing, right? So we tend to forget these things already exist. How as tech is here now, how does tech interact with the already existing things that are happening, right, in the space? And it's on that foundation that government have now come to say, okay, there's a rise of platforms, and social media platform is just one aspect of platforms, right? Everyone just look at platforms as social media or Twitter, Facebook, and all that. But there are other areas that are also very important, other types of platforms, right, that are also very important. And for what the government has been doing very recently is to come up with guidelines that would help bring some sanity in terms of how people interact on platforms. But one of like this very interesting example is the code of practice on internet intermediaries, right? I remember when the draft came out, it was novel in the sense that a lot of people still didn't really get the perspective of the government in terms of how they want to shape things, right? They just thought, oh, it's just one of these guidelines, right? But it's very important when we look at how other areas, other jurisdictions have looked at how to regulate internet intermediaries. For instance, I remember sometime in 2013, I was in school and we were doing like this competition, and that was the first time I saw the e-commerce directive, for example, right? The e-commerce directive since 2004, right? They already had a regulation guarding these things, right? Even if it was more streamlined to businesses to an extent, or streamlined to hosting certain type of information in the platforms, right? So it took us, 2004 e-commerce directive, it took us how many years for us to say, okay, you know what, I think internet intermediaries have to be regulated. But, and that is how like very recently the government is thinking about these things, right? There's the Protection Act, which is just one aspect of protecting data. Good data governance is the foundation for everything on tech, right? Once you have a good data governance, then you can start building on that foundation. Even you can have a good data governance, you can have a good AI governance without a good data governance, right? So in terms of that, the government now, there's a Data Protection Act in place. There is the Code of Practice for Internet Intermediaries. There is the new amendment to the Copyright Act. For instance, my ideas are online, right? If you want to infringe on my ideas, right, there should be a law guarding me, right? So if I tell you, oh, please take down this logo on your platform, right, because it infringes on my copyright or my trademark, right, I should have legal recourse. I should approach the authorities to help protect my rights, right? So that's why some of these things are important. And the government has those laws that I've mentioned and those guidelines, they've been in place now to help people, to help like guard interactions online, right? And generally, that's how the government is thinking about these things. Even if I always say the best way to regulate the internet is self-regulation, right? But not everybody's saying. Let's just be honest, right? So on that front, that's how the government is thinking about it. Like in terms of those laws that come up, and in terms of those guidelines, and we'll see how we can build on that and how we can interact with the government to make it better.
Okay, thank you so much, Bolaji. As you were talking, I remembered seeing in the news the other day a high-profile politician, I won't call names, talking about how they should ban social media in Nigeria. Not the first time. We always have these conversations. And I don't know, it just makes me think that are they aware that there is a structure to things, even from the government themselves? Like, are they aware that there are policies against hate speech, spreading misinformation? Now, recently, deep fakes. I saw that they resurrected Kendrick Lamar the other day from the dead. Drake and sorry, not Kendrick Lamar, Tupac Shakur from the dead to be giving rap battles against Kendrick Lamar. So the internet is a wild place right now. Our politicians think that the easiest way is to ban it, but okay. All right, so I'll throw a question to Adewolu now. We've heard Bolaji talk about some efforts of the government with regulating platforms. But also, there's, as I said, there are some politicians saying outrightly just ban it because of the misinformation. But I also recognize that there needs to be a balance. So platforms are necessary. They provide services, information, yes, right? And the government needs to encourage innovation. So there is that on the one hand. But those platforms can still be used for harmful purposes, spreading fake news, misinformation, deep fakes, children assault, sexual assault, all those things, identity theft. So platforms also can facilitate that. So there's a need to balance these things. In your opinion, are you seeing the Nigerian government doing that? Are we achieving that balance in Nigeria right now? In your opinion, if we're not, what do you think we should be doing better?
I try not to. I'm not very good at lying, so let me just tell the truth. No, but on a more serious note, I think, look, there's good news and bad news. There's been some progress. I think the code of practice, some elements of how we got to the final document was a step in the right direction and something we've never done before. Typically, when government is issuing a regulation about anything, and not just platform governance, anything, you know that the approach typically is something is issued and it has been signed and we move on. And if you don't do it,
yeah.
you know, what's that thing? The full weight of the law and all that stuff. Do you understand? But I think with the code of practice, there was an intention to take a slightly different approach, which was co-creation, right? So you look at what has happened in other markets like the EU, the DMA, Digital Markets Act and all of that, and then you say, okay, there's some good stuff here that we want to adopt, right? So who are the people that sit in this space? It's, civil society, it's platforms, it's, lawyers, it's journalists and all of that. And there was, to a fair degree, there was some attempt to bring all of those minds and opinions together. What I think perhaps could have been done better was to have been perhaps a bit more detailed and thorough about that process. It felt a bit rushed to me. Perhaps there were timelines and things that they needed to meet. Perhaps there were things that had happened and somebody in government said an action needs to be taken, so we need to see a result. So while the intention was, I think, excellent, perhaps the execution in terms of how it felt a bit rushed. And then for me, how they dealt with some of the feedback. I'll give you an example. Now, before an example, let me just, random question. Does anybody have any idea how much content is uploaded to YouTube every second?
Every second.
Yes.
Every second. All right. Anybody want to take a swing at that? Just guess. So I heard 1,000. I'm hearing 1 million. I'm hearing 10 million. So he's taking a statistical approach. 60 seconds of video is uploaded every minute.
So he has the right approach, actually, because when I said how many, I know that our minds immediately go to count. But it's factored in two things, the duration of the content and the count.
Okay.
It's actually 500 hours worth of content.
500 hours worth of context every second.
Yes.
Hmm.
So let's just assume that oil prices were right, there was no Oronsaye, government had all the money in the world, and they could employ people without limits. You need a department in some ministry or some agency that could deal with looking through that volume of content and being able to see where there's a violation and where there's no violation. A. B. When you're dealing with that kind of volume, it's not optimal that your primary channel of review will be human, because even humans, there's fatigue will set in. Even as a human, some of the content that you will see at some point, some things will jar you, right? Diminishing returns will set in. You hear sometimes about human reviewers and how they perhaps need time off, they need therapy and all of that. Because, I mean, most of us, 90-something% of us, were on the good side of social media, but there's some really horrible stuff that is peddled out there. And constant exposure to this kind of stuff, I don't think as humans we are designed to function that way. So that's another angle, right? So it's just optimal to continually expose a human to the function of having to review that kind of content. So which is why you find that in platforms such as ours, and I guess across, most platforms, the first channel of check is automated, right? And everybody talking about AI, and I'm like, guys, maybe generative is slightly a new kid on the block, but AI has been here forever,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
When thank you, God bless you. When you rely on your maps, right, and then your maps ask you when you park, and then I asked you, was this direction I gave you, was it right? Did you get you or whatever? The map is learning, it's intuiting, and then it's getting wise and sharper. When you're listening on okay, I keep talking about YouTube. Let me use somebody else's product. We're listening on Spotify or these are listen. And you skip a track, you skip another track, you skip another track. For you to skip. But for the system, it's actually learning
That this is
maybe
not
they
your
don't
taste,
like
yeah.
that one. The one that you replay, right? Or the one that you spend a bit of time on, or the one that you put and whatever, the machine tends to learn. So all of those things go into that system of putting us in a place where platforms can actually act on, and I'm being careful here, on their own kind of, right? So the platforms are continuously sought. I talked about community guidelines earlier on. Some things are clear, some things are just not permitted, right? Whether you're black, white, Jew, Hebrew, short, tall, some things are not permitted. Some things are age restricted.
Yes.
Some things are geolocation restricted. Some things are okay in Pakistan, but maybe not in Lagos, right? And I just think it's totally impossible for a human to carry out that function, which is why the first level of check is always the systems learn, they keep relearning when you define new rules. And in defining those rules, we're not reckless and all-knowing. In many instances, if not all, a lot of the ingestion that goes into the machine learning, it comes from, hey, what's the regulation in Nigeria? What's the regulation in Ghana? And how do we infuse that? What's the age of consent here? What's the age of consent there? What's okay here and what's not okay there? So it's on the one side, the things that we have sworn that our platforms will never be used for. And then on the other hand, it's also the things that the law has defined. So that's the first level of check. Now, whether infractions or for what you might call two-factor authentication, of course, you can't rely on a machine. There's no answer. I play around with some of the in-app AI, what you call them? What's the generic word for those things? Like the new one on WhatsApp and stuff where you can just ask questions.
Generative AI, chatbots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I ask questions, just not because I'm looking for an app, but I just want to see how low
Smart
you
it
can
is.
go.
Okay, how low?
Yeah, when I say low, as in how deep you can go. And
Okay.
you find out that sometimes nuance and culture and context is a challenge. The machine has not been exposed to certain data sets. It's not going to give you a wrong answer, and where it's honest, it tell you, I don't have an answer. I'm not, So that's why we also believe that yes, first level is machine automation, self-governance, and all of that. But then there's also a human element driven by understanding of local culture and context. Someone gave me an example some years back about, I think it was Ghana, some anti-LGBTQ type videos that if you looked at them, if you watched them, there was nothing wrong for me. It sounded like it was fine. But I understand that in Ghana there's some what you might call slang or something, that those things mean something actually different. So if I don't have those local context and nuance, I will not get it to fly over my head, right? So I just say all of this to point to the fact that there are many levels of governance, and traditionally, government has tended to look at these things from the angle of, I'm government, I have the powers, all 7 of them, Abido Shaker and everything, and I should make the rules. And from practice and experience, it's not the most effective approach to platform governance. All of those things need to come together. Self-regulation, automation, the human eye, continuously learning. What was okay 2 years ago might be a problem down the line, right? So that's why I started off with the example of the code of practice. The principle was right. Engage those who are in that space. What are the issues? How can we work together? And how can we define a set of rules? But then when you rush through, and then I tell you something like, for instance, you take down content, you say to me, and it comes from that same government power authority thing, you must take it down in 24 seconds. When I send it to you, just take it down now, right? But the way it works, there's a video on YouTube that is an hour and 30 minutes. The offending bit there is in minutes 45, 30 seconds. And I've told you the volume of content. So it's not like one guy sitting down waiting for the email from Nigeria to come so he can go and check it. He's checking 1,000 and God knows how many videos. So it helps to be precise when you say, take down this video, minute 25, this is the issue, this is the law and all of that. Now you send something to me today and you don't provide those kind of details. And then I send you back a notice to say, yes, I got this, but I don't have those details to act. And then maybe it landed at 4:48 and the guy has shut down, he has gone home. That's 24 hours gone. In your book, that's an infraction because I can take it down in 24 hours. But then because of experience, that's how we develop some of these laws that says sometimes 24 hours is not a good window. Not because we're lazy or we're wicked, but because we've seen how these things work. So for me, it's that head was in the right space. It was a great approach. It felt rushed. Optimal approaches, a bit of machine, a bit of human, a bit of continual learning, and being careful here, primary or prominent role, rely on what already exists. Don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, thank you, Adewolu. So I'd also ask Bolaji, do you think that the government is out of touch with some of these things? Are they talking to who they should be talking to? Are they understanding what they should be understanding? What do you think, in your opinion?
Interesting. I'm pro-society first.
Okay.
And I think it's important to give that context. And more often than not, this governance issue flows to the relationship between government, society, and tech, right? And there's something I will always say, whenever there's a problem, I always ask myself, is this a government problem, is this a society problem, right? And more often than not, we find that it's actually a society problem, right? It's hard to look in the mirror sometimes, right? And taking this to platform governance, particularly, we find that a lot of the content that people flag, especially when we see certain things online, right? That we find that they're concerning, right? Adewale said just 10% of that. 90% is good online, right? 10%. Some of them are concerning. But at the same time, we need to understand that even a speech that offends, that shock, is not necessarily bad speech, right? Is not necessarily do not need to be taken down, right? So that's why I was very glad that Adewale mentioned context. Context is very important, and context in Nigeria, context is very deep because of like how diverse like the country is, right? And if you want to say, okay, for everything that comes out, we need to fully understand the context, right? And the government is saying you must take this speech down in how many? 24 hours, right? I think, I remember when they released the draft, they said 24 hours, and those are some of the comments we made to the government that, oh, this is unreasonable, right? Because of like context and all this, and certain things need to be taken into consideration. I think they moved it to 48 hours for certain type of infringement. But that in itself, these are some of the things government need to understand when they come up with some of these things. And I always try to go back to the traditional stuff and not, like, I always bring tech next, right? Let's first address the government and society problem first, then we bring tech. Tech is the third player. And in my opinion, tech should always be the third player, right? Because this is a foundational issue that we need to solve first. For instance, when you post something online, my first recourse is my free speech. It has nothing to do with tech yet, but it's my free speech first. That does this, because when you post something online, there are two sides to the argument. I put something funny in quotes. Let's say I'm a comedian or I'm an influencer, especially in this time and age where those guys are making a lot of money. That's by the way. But and the government is saying, oh no, this doesn't make sense. This should be taken down, right? Because a certain set of people are offended by it, right? But that certain class of people, I'm tempted not to use majority because um, um, majority in Nigeria, I don't know, is very, it's very controversial, right? In terms of certain types of statements, right? So in that instance, somebody puts out something and you're mandated to take down that content, right? Especially in an instance where there's no court order. Court order is even down the line, right? And you're putting that responsibility on platforms, right, to take down. And in that instance, the platform has to be the judge of whether that content should be taken down or not. In that instance, especially when you're given 48 hours, because there's no way in the world, especially in the Nigeria judicial system, where you get a court order in 48 hours if it's speech offense, right? So a lot of responsibilities on platforms, right? I can't speak about Deolu, but I think some platforms are happy to take on that responsibility in some instances because they understand some of the nuances better than how government will look at certain things. But at the same time, that responsibility, usually on platforms, is the best bet in this moment, right? And the government should, as much as possible, let platforms decide some of these things, right? There's a flip side to it. I don't really want to comment on this in the sense that, in the sense of putting that in enormous burden. I know what Facebook did with the Supreme Court of Facebook, like I always say, was to have a content moderation board that looks at these things carefully, and also the right of appeal, right? When you take down somebody's content, you should have a right to say, oh, please, why are you taking down my content? Have you considered XYZ, right, before you take down this content? And instances where that content even ties to the person's livelihood, right? Then there should be a higher standard. And those are some of the nuances that we need to understand when we look at platform governance generally. And for instance, I will give a very practical example. I think Estonia sometime, I think it was in 2008 or so, Delphi and Estonia, one very popular case then. So somebody has an anonymous account, right, online, right? I put bad boy XYZ online. It's not Bolaji Ogalo, it's not my name, right? It's anonymous in that instance, and I come online and I say something derogatory online, right? And the government comes and say, oh, for the fact that, okay, and there's a platform that hosts this content online, right? But for the fact that this person posted this stuff online and you refuse to take down this content, then you have liability in that instance. And the platform comes and say, okay, yes, should we be the one to determine if this content is offensive or not? Is it objective? Is it subjective? Right? That's another thing we need to ask ourselves. Is it objective? Like, is it subjective? And in that instance, what should be my liability? I'm not the one that came up with the content. I just have the platform to host it, right? Yeah. So this now brings us to primary and secondary liability, right? Who should have primary liability? We have secondary liability. And the way the government is moving in terms of, remember when I was talking about what government has done, I intentionally omitted the Cybercrime Act. I intentionally omitted the act because, in my opinion, I don't think platforms should have criminal liability for those sort of things, right? And that is just me speaking broadly, right? We can interrogate it further, right? So in that Delphi in Estonia, that question of, okay, who should have liability when you did not post it, you just hosted it, right? And it was interesting because that was like one of a very important period where the whole internet governance, jurisprudence, platform intermediary liability was brought before the court and was questioned, and it developed a lot of what we see even today. So bringing it back here, right? The code of for platforms intermediary has brought some certainty in terms of who should have liability, right? And I always say, anywhere, the first duty of law, in my opinion, is not good. It's not whether law should be good or bad. It's certainty, right? The first requirement for law is certainty. I want to know that if I put my leg on this table now, I can be held, I can pay 5 million naira, right? So that's the first requirement. When we are certain, then we can come back and say, okay, is this law good or bad? What can we do to change the law? What can we do to this? Because even in countries where there are bad laws, businesses still thrive, right? It's just the certainty like we want. And the code has brought some certainty. Whether it's good or bad, we need to interrogate further It's a duty of every stakeholder to interrogate with the government to say, oh, we need to change this and that. But that certainty is there, and which is great. Not perfect, but great. So back to more specifically even what we see today in terms of how people interact online. And I think the committee guidelines have really helped, right? A lot of platforms have been very responsive, right? Even beyond laws in Nigeria, there are already laws in different jurisdictions where these guys operate that already gives them places liability on them, right? You come back to the local context, look at local laws and understand how to protect. But these guys have been doing it already, right? It is now more how governments can work closely with them to see how we can develop it further, right? So if it's not co-created with platform intermediaries, any law, any regulation is not co-created with platform intermediaries, it's bound to fail. It's not going to work in the long run because they have the tech, they understand the nuances, they understand how this is operate, they understand some of the challenges, right, that happens. And if government does not work closely with them, they're just going to carry the hammer every day, right? It's just going to kill businesses. And when I say kill business, I'm not talking about platform intermediaries themselves, but a lot of SMEs, a lot of businesses that rely on platforms
yes,
for their livelihood, which is a very huge. I don't think platforms talk about how much economic impact we make in the market. I don't think we talk about it enough, right? But people rely a lot on platforms, and it goes beyond even hate speech online or business commercial interactions. Those are important. And when you take down some of the accounts, it affects a lot of people, and people need to understand that.
All right, thank you, Bolaji. I like that your answer to costs outside Nigeria. You made reference to platforms that are global and how they would all be bound by other jurisdiction laws. You took us to Estonia and the case in Estonia. So I think I'll ask you a question to follow up, and I'll also ask Adewolu the same question. Let's limit it to Africa. Is any African country doing it better than us? And what can we learn?
I think there are some countries that are actually doing well in terms of their platform governance, data governance. Africa is a tricky one, by the way. Africa is a very tricky one for Africa. If you're looking more broadly at the EU or even
okay, let's make it broad. Let's make it global.
Global. Okay, if it's global.
I just feel we're reaching too high, but let's.
Yeah, but Kenya is doing a great job. Kenya is doing a really great job in terms of internet governance and data governance, platform liability, and all that. They're doing it it's quite. The tech ecosystem in Kenya is amazing. In the past 5 to 7 years, it has been amazing.
Yes.
In terms of when to interact with the tech ecosystem, what they are doing on their own, and how there are a lot of complementary efforts, even beyond across. I hate using the word startups, but across platforms. Right. Let me just be very broad. So Kenya is one country I feel we can also learn from, right? South Africa, we can pick a thing or two from South Africa too, but I think Kenya is doing really well. Ghana started really well, but
we have Ghanaians in the house.
Oh.
Somebody is giggling somewhere.
Yeah, the funny thing. Drift 2018 or 2019. I was in Drift, right? I was still very, very young then. And I used to come for Drift every year. There was a time it was in Lagos, then I was in Abuja. I was most likely the youngest person in the room then. But it was there were a lot of I remember somebody from I think the Ghana Data Commission or so coming for one event, and I was in a panel session. You just have this breakout room that have a lot of topics. So sometimes 2 topics are so interesting, you go for one, you scroll quickly, go to the other one, right? Then we're just young, hungry for knowledge and doing all those things. But then Ghana, I knew because I started researching a lot more about what Ghana is doing. I knew that Ghana was doing a lot in terms of data and trying to get some of these rules and make it very clear and simplify the process for startups in Ghana then. But beyond that, beyond Africa, one, the EU, to be honest, I think that the world's think tank, to be honest. Any regulation you're looking for, go to the EU. They've done something, you start talking about it. For instance, even on AI, the AI Act now,
Yes.
they are more advanced because they are thinking every day.
They're
They have
proactive.
very proactive. They have now ability to think, right? For instance, I mentioned the e-commerce directive, which was 2004, like a long time ago, right? Which already had platform liability. Like who would have thought, right? When every other person was doing the traditional notice and take down, let's just say there's a billboard here, and it has something offensive, or it violates somebody's copyright, then you write to the commission and say, "Oh, please notify these people to take down this stuff." Right? That was like more traditional way, and we saw that thinking move to the internet, right, and see how these people work. And there was a whole debate about who is a passive intermediary, who is an active intermediary, and because a passive intermediary, I don't have control over the content you put on my platform. I'm just laid back, right? You put your stuff on the platform. If I'm an active intermediary, I have full editorial control, right? I can cross something you put on my platform, right? So that distinction became important, right? Even now, the line between who's a passive and an active intermediary is very blurred now, right? There's a new dimension that was brought, intermediary, right? But the internet has developed, right? So that test is not so relevant in today's context, but we can see where it came from and how far we've come, right? But the EU, their stuff is still very important in today's liability. For instance, GDPR, for instance, like look at what we've done. So I'll always cite the EU, and there's one country where, if I look at something on tech regulation, I first say, well, what have this country done? It's Estonia. Very small country, but Estonia was doing blockchain a long time ago. They were doing their government digital identity a long time ago, before countries were playing catch up, right? So Estonia is another country that we should also be looking at in terms of best practice on the standard as we progress. So I think the US is still very complicated because of like how different a lot of these things are. But I'll pick the EU is one place that we should look at. There are also some NGOs doing some great work in terms of liability. For instance, the Countdown Principles, Article 19, like they are not legally binding, but they create guidelines that you can learn from, and you can use to develop your own laws or your own regulation in terms of internet intermediaries. So we should not just look at countries and governments in terms of how they're doing it. We should also look at the NGOs. They're doing a lot of stuff on free speech online. So Countdown Principles is a great one. There was one interesting one. I can't remember the title, but I think those are the areas that we should look at.
All right, thank you so much, Bolaji. So I'll throw the question back. You took us to Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, the EU, Estonia, and you said we should also look outside countries to principles and standards. All right, Adewolu, do you have anything to add, your own perspective? Are there people that we can look at, countries, to draw examples?
I'm typically careful with using country examples. I have a slightly different take.
Okay.
When you think of technology, and you hear it a lot, digital economy, this, that, and the other. My question always is, what do you want to get out of this? Do you truly understand the transformative potential, first off, for your citizens and the people that use it, and then in a collective for you as a country? One of the expressions I hear a lot, I dislike the expression, but I appreciate the principle behind it. They tell you data is the new gold. it's upsetting, but the principle behind it is that you realize that there's value,
Yes.
right, in something data. It's not gold. It's not. But if I knew, if I knew your name, I knew your date of birth, I knew the places that you like to go, the places that you don't like to go, the things that you like to eat, the things you don't like to eat, it's easier for me to create products that will speak to you. And you look at something like advertising. Before now, an advertiser just had to, I pay that TV channel, whoever they are, and I figure that maybe around this time of the day, this particular people that I'm trying to get should be in front of their TV. They might be in the house and not be in front of the TV. They could be in front of the TV and be flipping through a different channel, right? But with that level of being able to drill down to data and understanding the user, it can be more precise with the timing.
Yes, more targeted.
With the channel, it might not necessarily even be TV. It could be something else. So that's why I say that to make the point about understanding what we want to get out of technology. And to go back to answer your questions, if we truly understand that the end game, in my view, should be about transformation for your citizens, for yourself, for your country. And if really that is the case, then we should be thinking more in terms of blocks and markets.
Okay.
As opposed to want to make a law for Nigeria because we're the giant and our jollof is the best.
So it should be more sectoral, more
Regional
industry
block
specific.
market.
Okay.
Regional block market. Maybe it's a bit of a leap to say, let's start. The examples you gave, a lot of the examples you gave came from the EU. It's easy to make EU laws because EU is a block.
Yes.
It's a block commercially, it's a block legally, it's a block in many respects, right? So if we find a model that works in one country that applies across, and it's easy, one, for commerce, it's easy for those who are investing, it's easy to produce for that kind of market because
yes,
you
create some form of uniformity.
Scale, right? You don't want to have a Google for Lagos and then another one for Ondo and one for Nigeria, another one for Ghana. You want the same experience. If people talk about creative economy and how it has blown, whiskey and all of that, basically it's the fact that the experience that you're going to have if you were watching a YouTube video or whatever, whiskey or whoever in Idumota, probably the same thing you have in Kandahar or wherever. It's the platform, it's the platform, it's the platform. So whatever Whiskey wanted to say to somebody in Lagos using those platforms, he can say to somebody in some other country using the same platforms. So that principle of we want to be global, or maybe not global is a stretch, but we want to create impact in a block outside of our circle of Nigeria and Lagos will be my answer to your question of what should we be looking at. So let's begin to think in terms of maybe AU is a stretch, but can we start regionally? There's been a lot of talk about ECOWAS. What have we done with ECOWAS? Not just commercially, but in terms of making tech laws. Data protection was the easiest example most recently. People were like, our data needs to be local. We can't let anybody take our data. All those tech giants, they're going to take our data to, America and sell it, they're going to know everything. But there's a flip side. Flutterwave is headquartered and incorporated some other place, but for all intents and purposes, they're a Nigerian company, right? Flutterwave started off here. But you look at the markets where I was talking to somebody in Kenya the other day, and they were like, some of the guys who have been powerhouses in Kenya and finance, they're sitting up because they're looking at, hey, the licenses these guys are getting, the inroads that they're getting. Flutterwave is becoming an African brand, right? And if you look at it, that means that Flutterwave has access to process and transfer data across those markets where they operate. And that has been essential for their growth as a business. So when we say that we want to create some of these kind of boundaries, we're not just blocking outside from coming in, we're also blocking inside from going out, right? So it's for me that message of, I don't want to look at a particular country as an example, but I want to recommend that we think in terms of blocks, because that's the real essence of technology, really. If we can't transform and transform at scale, we have a few pockets, we have a few, startups, WizKids, not the one with David, like WizKid, people doing great things in tech, right? But you want that to grow at scale because that's the next best thing for us. I'm not a prophet or anything, but I don't know if oil prices would ever be what they were when they were doing close to 100. The question was, we have so much money, you don't know what to do with it, right? So what's the next best thing, right? And we see that we have a young population. There's an interest in tech. There is, to some significant degree, there's infrastructure. People say Nigeria this, Nigeria that. But if you traveled across a few African countries, our mobile telecoms is not the worst. Our internet is decent. Decent. I know before you decent, right? So there's a platform for which people can access the internet and learn and showcase what they do. I mean, it blows my mind. I don't know if you experience it. Like clockwork, every weekend when I go out, either in the supermarket or you're driving through somewhere in Lagos, there's some young guys and girls under a bridge shooting a video, in supermarket aisles, they're creating
Content
content.
creators.
I'm like,
Okay.
what's the dream? But I might not get it, maybe because I'm not in that space. But for them, it's a thing that I have this talent, I can do something. If I show it to somebody somewhere else across the world and I create a short or a TikTok thing, they're going to like it, they're going to become a trend and all of that. So we need to start thinking in terms of that. How do we grow out rather than in terms of how do we keep in, and protect and create these sequesters? Technology is for transformation and change at scale. If you want to make technology policy, governance, whether it's for content or whatever it is that you call it, I think it's imperative that you think at that same level of scale.
Okay, thank you. I align my thoughts with you. The way technology works, by its very nature, it transcends borders. We can't even take it will be counterproductive to take a Nigeria approach. Because if we have a diversity of approaches, I can imagine what these platforms in-house will be facing, knowing, okay, what applies here may not apply here. And then they have to start thinking of, okay, where do we find common grounds? Where are the areas of convergence, divergence, give a lot of people headaches. So I align with the block approach. That brings me to the end of the questions that I have. I'd ask you if you have any final words, any charge, both of you, and then we would open the floor for comments from the audience.
Final word for me is I think that one of the best things that have happened across the last couple of years was the creation of that ministry called digital economy and every other thing you added on the back of it. Because really and truly it is an economy.
Yeah.
Right? There is a substance that through which people can create value, one independently by themselves and then collectively as a block. And the greatest thing about it is that in many cases, the power really and truly literally is in our hands, right? So when we think about technology, let's zoom back in to that thought of, yeah, there are downsides and there are risks and there are threats, but there's an immense opportunity to leapfrog. We don't have, how do I say? We don't have many advantages that people cannot replicate, such as that population thing that everybody talks about. In many other countries, they're trying to trim down, but for whatever reason, for good or for bad, our population is growing, right? And at the same time, they're going at the time when there is access to technology, and technology is so democratic. I remember there was a time when I shouldn't be saying this, I'm dating myself, but there's a time when if you needed to make a call, you need to go to one place.
Call
and
centers.
then you bring call center was even good. There was a time when, it was one guy in the neighborhood that had a phone. Then they would tell you that your auntie has called and you need to be there in 15 minutes. And then they won't put the phone back on the receiver, but they'll put the phone. Meanwhile, your auntie is paying, right? Because the call is calling, and then you have to run and go. But now you can, from here, call anybody anywhere. You can create content, talk to anybody anywhere. So we have that opportunity, right? And my charge every time and anytime I engage with people who make policy for technology is there are risks and there are concerns, I wouldn't lie, right? But there's also immense opportunity. Let's not zoom in so hard on the risks and the challenges,
Yes.
such that we lose the opportunity.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Adewolu. That was spot on. Apology.
Yeah, I think Adewale has covered the field. Like, opportunities is immense. And for me, I always say, like, after education, like the second greatest equalizer is technology, right? Because it goes without saying, like, I can be here speaking to somebody in Cairo, I'm speaking to somebody in Bahamas, like we are having an interaction. I'm doing work for him, right? And I always use India as a very good example, right?
And two things the government really invested in that lifted a lot of people out of poverty was education and technology, right? Education one, it took them a long time, right? Because education is a long-term investment. It's a long-term investment, right? But um, and some government do not have the patience because it doesn't give them return in 4 years, right? This means just speaking broadly. So after education technology, we saw what telecommunication did for a lot of people in India, right? And them um, being like the outsourcing capital of the world, it's because of like direct government policies that could aid that. Like, if you want to be, if you want to have a job, if you want to work, you must be educated. You must know how to use technology, and technology is both you knowing how to use it and facilitating the platform in which you interact with people. So those two areas are so important, and I think we can't miss out on that. We can't neglect one and focus on the other. Both have to go side by side. And if you do not educate somebody, he's going to use technology in a very wrong way, right? And even as brothers, even fighting terrorism, right? Like, you always say, in my opinion, that two ways to fight terrorism. Is either the book or the bullet, right? The book in terms of educating people in the long term, but the bullet in terms of is a pressing need, you need to address it immediately, and you need to use the right aggression to address it. And for me, if the government do not invest in these two things, and the government do not support businesses, platforms, and co-create with them, then we're going to have a problem in the long run. And it's not going to help anybody. So if you want to come up with policies, if you want to come up with interactions, if you want to come up with the right sound regulations, you need to work very closely with the platforms, the tech companies. Every good regulation has to be co-created. Government and society. And society, I'm using society very broadly to include the private sector too, the civil society organizations. They need to sit down together and come up with like the right document. And for technology, regulating technology has to be very light, in my opinion. You can't use a lot of laws. I don't like using laws to regulate technology. I don't believe in using laws to regulate technology. I believe in policy and guidelines, using policies and guidelines that are easy to amend. And amendment is very tricky here because I say easy to amend. You can say government can go and amend it overnight and create problems. But when I say easy to amend, is in the light of amending with private sector and society, right? So for me, unless like we have that approach in terms of co-creating, and the government also invests heavily in the foundational things like education, that's when we're going to see progress, like in the long run. And yeah, I really hope like that happens sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, Bolaji. I would open the floor for okay.
Maybe not question in the strict sense of it, but I just also, for the benefit of everybody in the room, to first, I wanted to speak with respect to. So, one of the things you said during the conversation is, the realities of what happened when sometimes there's a request from government, for example, for a takedown, and when those requests come, sometimes they don't come with all the information that you would need to be able to maybe act on it swiftly. So, my question to you is, from your perspective and from Google's perspective generally, what have you done in terms of socializing the processes that would help you, for example, to be able to maybe respond swiftly to requests like that? Because I think the challenge we have is that from the government perspective, there is really not a system in place to facilitate that sort of engagement with platforms. So even though we talk about the code of practice, but we know that the way Nigeria works, the code of practice is a NIDA initiative, for example. Somebody in the presidency can get angry and reach out to Google directly and not even care about the system that has been put in place. So just thinking about what efforts are you putting in place in terms of trying to, especially in your engagement with government entities, to sort of socialize with the system, that the kind of thing they need to understand This is how, if you need to reach us, this is the information you should send to enable you to get maybe the response that you want from us. So that's my question to you. Then my question to Bolaji, I just think it would be very helpful for everyone in the room, especially since we're talking about Nigeria. Would you be kind to share with us what happened with respect to the back and forth with the Lagos state government? It would be a great experience for you to share with us and a great knowledge for everybody in the room. What was the conversation? What was the concern that Uber had that you were not willing to cooperate with the government initially? And how did you guys arrive at that consensus to eventually come to a conclusion and whatever conclusion you came to, what gave in, as in what compromise did you have to make and what demands, what was the concern initially and how did you now eventually arrive at a consensus? Thank you.
One of the reasons I believe companies are incorporated or headquartered in Estonia is because of their low income tax policy, which if it's not distributed, plowed into the business, you don't get to pay the income tax. And then also maybe for US, most of the companies, or let me say 2/3 of the 500 companies incorporated in US were incorporated in Delaware. And that's because of the policies that they have there. So bringing all that together, how would you say, since it's tax, let me say fiscal policy, how would you say in Nigeria or maybe in Africa, the fiscal policies can be put together in such a way that it would influence the growth of maybe not just fintechs, but businesses and attract FDIs into the economy?
I will just ask my question to the Google man. Coming from fake news, misinformation, AI, algorithm, and all that, and credible platform, there are allegations that Google and possibly other platform uh, give more, try to put more visibility for content that people, in quotes, want, even though they are not credible because they have commercial value. That's the power of the commercial value of those information, even though they may not be credible source, because this is coming from especially media platforms that think that and this is also related to platform governance, that think that content, especially on Google, on some other platform, receive more visibility, even though they may not be credible content. What do you have to say to that? And my last question, it will be that are the platform really transparent, especially to the consumers? Because most times African governments, like what we have with X, they say, oh, we have spoken to them. This is today we are still acting X or Twitter. What exactly did the government tell you? And I hope Adeolu will not run from that question that Boye asking. Thank you.
So Bolaji has the hardest part, so let me just do the easy part and go and eat my jollof. So I think Boye's question, in footballing terms, it's called a through pass. And being the number 9 that I am, I will take it. Thank you, Boye. So I think it's an absolutely valid point. When we talk about co-creation, many times, there's a silo that we need to break out of. So, developers, tech people, and all of that, you're very focused on technology. Technology is very fast. You're just trying to, what's the next best product? How do I make my product better and all of that? Government, like I said initially, is a social barometer, right? That they're motivated by a totally different set of considerations. And it's not a bad thing. That's just government's function. Government cannot be, or government should not be overly focused on, commerce, revenue, return, dynamic products, and all of that, right? So, in bridging that divide, I think that we have a role to create an environment of communication, knowledge share, right? Many times when we complain about regulation, yes, there are places where, or there are cases where they went from 0 to 100 super fast and there was no room to speak. But many times, or sometimes, there's room to speak, but there's a void because they don't understand what they're regulating for, right? They don't understand how a platform works. They don't understand the role of a platform. For instance, when you're talking about content and all of that, we try to draw a distinction that YouTube is not, the content on YouTube is user generated, right? YouTube doesn't generate anything. There was an interesting case, I think it was in the UK some years back, where someone, I'm sure it was in the UK, there was a prior conviction, I think it was for rape or some sexual assault or something. And then a few years down the line, a different set of facts came to light. And he asked to say that, well, this is a, like an acquittal, right? So I need you to expunge any prior references to my first conviction, right? But the fact is that if you understand how a platform like search works, search does not create, okay, well, now that there's generative, it can create, right? But search, traditionally and fundamentally, is a aggregator of content online. If you're going to search for Paradigm Initiative, everything and anything that has been published online about Paradigm Initiative will pop up. And that's what you will find. So like in that man's case, for instance, at a certain point in time, you are convicted of certain things, true. At a certain point in time, the conviction was faulted and it was lifted, quashed, whatever, true. But those two sets of things are parallel truths, and they should and they will exist online, right? But if you don't understand that thing, you're going to send me a thing to say, I need all evidence of that prior conviction to be taken down. The evidence of prior conviction doesn't exist with me. I did not create it. There's probably a news, Daily Mirror or something when you were convicted that published it. So you're going to have to look at every single instance of reporting on that prior conviction to get the answer that you want. And that's not technically feasible. So that's why I say we have a role to play there. And what we have typically done in the past was to have this workshop sessions where we try to explain, YouTube explains, try to explain product. This is how it works. Funny enough, for content moderation, we have dedicated web forms for government. And why they're dedicated is because given the volume that I explained to you earlier, what happens on YouTube, you can imagine the volume of complaints and escalations that teams are looking at. But we have a dedicated track for governments all across the world, right? If you submit your request through this particular, it's a web form, we share with them when we have those kind of interactions. If you submit your complaint through this channel, you provide the required information, you get priority treatment for that complaint, and we'll give you feedback of the action that has been taken. So I think it's that conversation that needs to continue, that needs to be deepened. We need to step out of our respective silos and speak to each other a bit more, speak at each other a bit less. Role of fiscal policy, again, I think an excellent point. I always have this thing about when people talk about foreign direct investment, investors are like, they're like pirates in the days of old, right? They don't need advertisements. They have intelligence. They know what's going on. They know when the ship with all the gold is going to pass that place and how many soldiers are on the ship, so they know how much ammo they should bring. It's the same way you have people today who are analysts and all of that. Analysts are steadily crunching figures. They're telling you what's ease of doing business in that country, what's the employment rate, what's the unemployment rate, what's inflation, what's the ease of repatriating capital and all of those things. And people who make investment decisions see all of that data, right? So if you are looking at the great stuff happening in the likes of Estonia and co that you mentioned, it's not magic. There was a science. They created a certain kind of environment. And let's be fair, we want to be focused on general common good and all of that. But if you are a person who was signing those checks, you would have an eye on, if I had 10,000 naira, it's not limitless, right? And I want to invest this 10,000 naira, what's the best choice for me to make in terms of getting a return, getting a decent return, and not getting my money stuck? Those are the basic things that investors look at. You mentioned certainty earlier on. I need to know that if I say good morning in the morning, it's morning, regardless of my height, my orientation, religion, whatever. You don't want a situation where if you say good morning and it's him that was there when I said it, when he moves and she comes in, so like actually it's good night, and that's very insultive and it becomes a problem. So all those kind of things about certainty of laws, a friendly socioeconomic system, if you will, what are you doing in terms of, and I'll make a quick aside, this thing going on right now in Lagos with demolitions and all of that, I'm not going to go into who is wrong and who is right, but you realize that today when people want, and for the longest time, people want to buy cars, there's this thing called VIN, right? So with a VIN, you don't have to go to America or Europe or wherever. If you have I think it's chassis number and something of that car, there's a publicly available, and it's on all day. It's not a website that was on yesterday and that's crashed today. You enter the details, chassis number and engine number, and it gives you the history of that car, right? And I remember a friend told me about how they brought him a car that was an Accord and was really happy I had gotten a great car, and then put the car in VIN. And the car I saw on VIN, same chassis, same everything, was a coupe. So apparently, some transform. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me how you transform a two-door into an Accord, but hey, that's what Vin said. So the same way with this Lagos thing, if you had a publicly available site where people could go and check, okay, I'm buying number 13, blah, 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 blah. What are the encumbrances on it? Who is the person who has the right title? Maybe it's Bolaji that sold it to me doesn't actually have any title, but he has shown me some documents, but I can go somewhere and verify, and check. So it's all of those kinds of things. How do I easily access laws and rules? It shouldn't be something, there's a chairman, he only comes at 8 o'clock, and it's only when he comes that he can show me. We should be a bit less secretive about those things. Information, open access, and all of that. Your question about algorithms, which is pretty much what I heard and what is exposed. Look, there's a few things that I think underpin that. First off is, we need to understand how things pop up on people's feeds. First off is preference and what you do. And I gave that example earlier with the music. And the same thing with some of the ones that are graphic heavy. What I spend time on, either in terms of liking or how long it takes me to flick through something, says to the system that there's an interest here and I'll get more of it. What I spend less time on, or I actually put I not interested and all of that, says to the system that maybe they don't necessarily like this. And the system will deprioritize showing me that. That's one level, right? The other level, and I'm trying not to be too technical, is you should look at the way the ad systems works. There's a bidding auction process for search entries and returns, right? So if somebody is searching best guitar learning classes in Lagos, right? You get a generic list of the best guitar learning places in Lagos, but those have actually gone through that auction and bidding process to get a 1 or 2 steps higher up above everybody, might get a prioritization in terms of how it's displayed, and there'll be a marker there to tell you that it's an ad, it's not generic information, so you are guided in terms of your whatever. And I don't think it's a Google thing. I think it's across. I've noticed lately a lot on Twitter when they put explanations at the back of a tweet to tell you, maybe somebody has tweeted to say this was how they were killing Chinese people in 1984, and then Twitter is going to tell you, no, that's not true. This video is not actually China. It was actually 1982, and there were no Chinese people involved, right? So all of those markers are there, right? I see what you're saying in terms of how there is a sense that many times a lot of what we display and what we prioritize is driven by commerce and profit. But it's not exactly true. Many times there's a science beneath these things, which are the things I've explained to you, what you spend time on, what you expect a preference for, and then of course that issue of ads and commercialization. Even when you talk about ads and commercialization, there are certain things that will not be prioritized because somebody has bidded or whatever. Some things are wrong and some things are wrong. You won't say that because you paid for something. If it violates the community guidelines or the content or the platform rules, it will not get surfaced, it will not get displayed. So it's, maybe I'm happy to have a pull aside, a one-on-one, but the number of considerations are going to it. I understand the fear that you're expressing about how sometimes there's a sentiment that commerce trumps over your responsibility to be proper or to be civil or responsible in terms of what you expose and display. But it's not exactly that way. All of those metrics impact what happens on a person's feed or what a person sees on social media. But happy to have a conversation. I think I covered all the...
Yes, I think those were the 3 questions to you.
No, you can't.
I'll try not to be political. I'll try and be very direct on this. But so first, it's an ongoing conversation, and I'll put it that. And like lawyers in the room, when there's a matter in court, everybody. But yeah, it's sub judice, yeah. So everyone, but it's not in court. That's just me. Okay, so in terms of data, and I'll speak broadly, and I'll touch on some specifics for context. And broadly, interacting with government you need to do a lot of explanation about how these things work. And it's not because they do not know, but the truth is that private sector always have expansive knowledge than government. Technology moves faster than laws, right? The same way businesses have more knowledge, especially for a global company like Uber, right, or Google, they have seen this thing play out in different parts of the world, right? We have come from an era where government did not even know how to define Uber, right? Are you a transport company? Are you a tech company? What do you do, right? And traditionally, they'll group us with taxes. I say, oh, yeah, but we're not taxes. We do not own any assets, right? We are asset light. We just connect people, right? That's what we just lead generation we do, right? So we needed to do that. Even governments where you think, oh, these governments are more advanced, even in the US and you have to explain that to them, right? Same thing here, right? You need to explain, oh, how these things work. And when government comes and say, in this instance, okay, we want XYZ data. And we're like, okay, yeah, we understand you might have an interest somewhere, right? But we have a responsibility because on our platform, because there's a contract, whether we call it a commercial contract or a social contract between users on our platform and at the platform, right? That when you share your data with us, it's protected. We will not share that data with anybody without your consent, right? In this instance. But however, we need to look at the data sets, right? What data are you asking for, right? Is it PII, personal identifiable information? And if it's PII, we will not share that data with you, right? Unless, and I'm putting a very good caveat here, unless there is like an overriding public interest. An overriding public interest, even if governments have tend to interpret that very broadly, there are certain instances that are justifiable. For instance, if there is a security incident on the platform, we have to share that data with law enforcement. And we have a clear process for sharing that data with law enforcement. There's even on the website, there's a place you go online, you fill a form. If the police comes and asks, we work closely with the police to share that data, just that trip data. But we can't share every data on our platform with you wantonly, like you can see it. You're seeing everybody's this thing. So, and the good thing is that to have a government that listens. And interesting, we had a government that listened in Lagos State government, in Lagos State. Even if, to an extent, we have a government that listens with the Lagos State, right? We have and that's like, when I say co-creation, sometimes it's not the private business that's all knowing. Sometimes the government also knows what they want and why they want it, what they want, right? And you need to sit down and listen to them. Oh, okay, we understand this. How can we reach a middle ground, right? How can you address my concerns? How can we address your concerns? Because the government say they want this data for safety and incidents of security. Then we will say, okay, yes. Okay, for security, okay, if there's an incident, we share data with you, no problem, right? And that's the middle ground. Instead of just sharing everybody's data with the government, yeah. And that's like the middle ground we reached with the government. And there are valid reasons for doing that. They saw our reason why we were hesitant, right? And that's where we are, right? And we have reached a middle ground, which is important for both business and government. And I'll say this again: co-creation is important. Business is not all knowing, government is not all knowing. Both they have to sit down together and define what works. Because at the end of the day, anything government is working for society. Business serves society, right? And if both business and government find that common ground, then I see no reason why things should not work, right? It's when one party is arrogant, the other party is arrogant, nothing works, right? And that's where we are with the Lagos State government. So I see Viola you're looking funny, but that's where we are, and it was important that we had our understanding.
Okay, thank you, Bolaji. I think that behind the title and the position in the economy are just people who are open to reason. I mean, if you sell them something they want to hear, they most likely they may be amenable to your position. So I believe that answers Adeboye's question. So they reached a middle ground. That is what he's saying. So
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do
Please hope
a
this,
breakout conversation between two of you
yeah,
later.
hope this is Chatham House rules. I know what I say. What I say, yeah, obviously is these are like private conversations, like, but it's important to share this and for learning. That's
Yes.
when like we can move
Yeah.
forward. I think I just wanted to add to just something Adewale said on the fiscal side. On the fiscal side, and I know obviously Delaware is very popular because of housing those startups. Like I'm sure, like if you take a survey, who was Delaware before startups? A lot of people don't know where's Delaware, right? But it's important, right? As much as we want to attract government, every government wants to attract businesses. Every government wants to raise revenue, right? And you must find a good balance, right? And more often than not, we see people a bit myopic in terms of how they want to raise revenue, right? They think we want this money now, we want this money today, we want this money, right, in 6 months, right? But you realize that you pushing together money in 6 months, you're going to kill a business that is going to generate more money for you in 10 years, right? But it's just gradual and slower, right? And I'm speaking, I'm not even speaking like Nigeria markets is one, but I'm even using like some other markets in West Africa here, right, where we have to sit down with government and say, calm down, please. Like, we understand we are willing to help you raise revenue. Like, I don't think any business will say we don't want government to raise revenue, because at the end of the day, government needs revenue to build infrastructure, right? For instance, even in Uber now, we contribute to a road development fund, right, in Lagos, because they need to build roads, right? And we're not opposed to that. It helps the business in the long run, right? The same way, government should also see that certain revenue generation initiative might kill a business, right? If you want it quickly. So because you want it quickly, you raise rates higher, get higher rates, right? Because you want it quickly. Yeah. So I think that approach is very important for any government, and I'm sure Delaware is making a lot of money, right? But when they started, we're like, oh, these guys are losing a lot of money, but they're making a lot of money now because a lot of startups are there, right? And even for the Nigerian market, I think when we talk about like federalism and states, like devolution of power, I think states should start thinking in that direction. I want an Ondo state to say, okay, come to my states, let's say for telcos now, we say right of way is free. I know Ekiti tried that one time. Right of way is free. You won't pay taxes for 5 years. You won't do this. We'll support you in doing this. We'll give you, and it makes it more competitive in terms of getting businesses to come and people to come and do business there, right? And at the end of the day, certainty, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like just make everything very clear and certain that this are my liabilities, this is what I'll do if I come to your state.
Thank you, Balaji. So I think it's a good place to discharge our speakers. I know we overshot what we initially promised with time. Thank you for your audience and your time and for engaging us. I think we can give them a round of applause as they head back to their seats. Thank you.
What food do you make inside leaf or nylon? Good.
You can't say food, so that's cancelled.
Where is the food?
Food is there. The time is running now. The time is running now. Argue it later. See.
Lagos. The most popular transportation in Lagos. No, another name. Good.
One.
If you're a student, what food do you eat most for?
You can't say food.
There's food. The capital of Nigeria, the most popular city in it. No.
That's your time.
Oh.
That's your time. We tried. Let's have a taste. Are you ready? Team two members, can you raise your hand? Let's be sure that you'll be able to. There are two people seated. All right. Ha, Valerie, are you not team two?
we are very
Okay. All right. So your time starts now.
Female artist, top female music artist. Oh,
She has it.
huh?
Tiwa, continue. Time is running. There wasn't. There wasn't.
God, this
Sorry.
I don't know. Ah,
Give it a shot.
I'm giving it a shot. Ah, no. I'm
Show it
giving
now,
up.
like.
No.
The guy is trying to talk to you.
Another word for Buga. Shaka.
Time up. That's your time. All right. Okay.
All right.
It's your time.
Let's go.
But baby pana. Say once you
Small chance.
Mama's lovely food. It's not, Mama's lovely food. Hunger.
So that's three.
Hey, actually, they can't.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. When you win. All right, this is your time.
Her husband contested for one of this house of no, here in Lagos State. In House of Rep. Her husband contested.
Continue.
It's something they take in the north, similar to Akamu.
That's one.
When you are sick, you take it to feel better. It's
That's not even your team.
they wear it. It's an outfit from the Yoruba tribe.
So
It's a
that's your time. Thank you. Team two.
right. We got three.
Yes.
Small bowl.
The second one.
Igbo leader. Oh shit. I fucked that up.
It wasn't Kobe.
Nah. No. This is terrible. Oh shit.
English.
I was terrible. Cover my face with shame.
Team two, just clap for your group members.
I just want to thank everybody who made it here, and especially for those of us who stayed to the end of the event. I hope it was a worthwhile engagement for you, and I hope that very soon we'll see again hopefully having conversation on another topic of interest somewhere in Lagos. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but I know that we are going to have another conversation very soon, particularly about internet infrastructure. I don't know the date yet, but we'll reach out to you to invite you to be part of that conversation as well. And let me especially thank the tech advisory team that are here today. I don't know everybody by name. I know you all told me your name today, but I won't mention any name so that it doesn't. I don't leave out any name, but just to specially thank Tech Hive Advisory, thank the leadership, Ridwan and DG, for the partnership, and also my colleagues that are here from Paradigm Initiative. Thank you very much, everybody, for making this a reality. I hope you will enjoy the rest of your evening. And for those who are worried about the traffic situation, you could as well stay back, especially for those going back to the mainland, you could as well stay back, enjoy the life of your head on the highland, and go back home at 11 p.m. when the road will be free. All right, so at this juncture, I would say we've come to the end of the event. So from this point on, you are not officially liable to stay back. But if you choose to stay back, you are welcome. I will make sure I stay here until the last person leaves. Thank you, everybody. And if you have not filled the evaluation form, please just spend a minute. It takes just a minute to fill it, so it's a very straightforward thing. It takes just 1 minute to fill it. So kindly just scan the code and fill the evaluation. We want to hear back from you so that we organize a better event next time. If you don't feel it, we will not know what we didn't get right. So we need to know what we didn't get right. And if you are feeling it, be comfortable to say your mind. We're not going to be angry that you don't like anything about the event. So please feel free to tell us exactly how you feel. If there are aspects of the event that you think we can do better on, please speak your mind, and we'll be so glad to receive those feedback. Thank you very much.